Daddy, look, I drew our house. 5-year-old Maya squealed, running across the hardwood floor and holding up a piece of paper covered in bright crayon strokes. I knelt down, catching her in my arms, and took the drawing. It's amazing, Maya. Look at how tall you drew me. Because you're the tallest daddy ever, she giggled, hugging my neck tightly before turning back to her small craft table in the corner of the living room. Watching her play, my heart swelled with absolute warmth. For 4 years, Maya had been my entire world. I had wiped her tears, stayed up during her late-night fevers, and taught her how to ride a bike. When I met my fiancée, Chloe Vance, Maya was just a baby. Chloe had told me through tears how her wealthy ex-boyfriend, Julian Prescott, had abandoned her the second she got pregnant. I had stepped up without hesitation, loving both of them with everything I had. She adores you, Lucas, Chloe said smoothly, walking out of the kitchen with 2 cups of coffee. She set one on the desk and wrapped her arms around my shoulders from behind. I adore her too, I replied, pressing a soft kiss against her cheek. I can't imagine my life without her. Chloe smiled, reaching into her leather purse and pulling out a thick manila envelope. She slid it across the wooden desk in front of me. What's this? I asked, looking up at her in confusion. It's the legal adoption paperwork, Chloe said, her voice dropping into a soft, persuasive tone. Julian's lawyers reached out again last week, trying to clean up his public image. He wants to sign away his parental rights completely so he doesn't have to deal with future custody claims. If you sign these papers, Lucas, you become Maya's official, legal father forever. My eyes lit up with deep emotion. Are you serious, Chloe? You want me to officially adopt her? Of course I do, Chloe said, running her hand through my hair with a warm smile. You've been her real father since day one anyway. Julian was just a mistake from my past. Once you sign this, he's completely out of our lives forever. I'll sign them right now, I said, reaching for a pen with an eager grin. Wait, honey, Chloe interrupted quickly, putting her hand over mine. The adoption lawyer said we need a routine medical panel first. Just standard background stuff regarding hereditary conditions. You know my family has a history of heart murmurs, so the clinic wants a full genetic marker match from Maya's medical file before finalizing the transfer. That makes sense, I nodded. We should be thorough. I'll set up the appointment for tomorrow morning at Genesis Diagnostics, Chloe said, kissing my forehead. I am so happy, Lucas. We're finally going to be a real family on paper. The next morning, I stood inside the white clinic office while the nurse drew a tiny blood sample from Maya's arm. Maya whimpered softly, and I immediately held her hand, pulling her close to my chest. You're so brave, sweetie, I whispered, brushing her hair back. All done. While Chloe stepped out into the hallway to answer a phone call from her wedding planner, I walked over to the clinic counter. A quiet thought had crossed my mind, a simple, practical thought. If I was adopting Maya legally, I wanted a full genetic screening on file to cross-reference her health markers against any future medical issues, just in case Julian's family had hidden conditions. Excuse me, I said quietly to the receptionist, pulling out my credit card. Can we add a full DNA paternity comparison panel to this blood sample? I know I'm adopting her, but I want her complete genetic health profile verified against the father's record for her permanent chart. Certainly, Mr. Ramsey, the clerk replied, typing on her keyboard. Since you have custodial consent from the mother for the medical panel, we can process the full genetic comparison markers within 48 hours. Thank you, I said softly, paying the extra fee without thinking twice about it. I wasn't looking for a secret. I just wanted to be a responsible father. 2 days later, I sat in my home office while Maya was taking an afternoon nap. My laptop chimed with an urgent notification from Genesis Diagnostics. A secure PDF document attached to an email from the lab read, Official DNA Paternity Evaluation Results. My hands shook slightly with excitement as I opened the file. I wanted to print it out and frame it alongside the adoption papers. I scrolled past the medical disclaimers down to the primary genetic marker summary. My eyes scanned the lines of text, reading the formal conclusions. Tested male, Lucas Ramsey. Probability of paternity, 0%. I nodded to myself. That made sense. I already knew I wasn't her biological father. But then my eyes dropped to the secondary comparative control panel that the lab had pulled from Julian Prescott's court-mandated biological registry file, which Chloe had submitted for the adoption waiver. Secondary comparative control, Julian Prescott. Probability of paternity, 0%. Conclusion: the tested child, Maya Vance, shares 0 genetic markers with the alleged father, Julian Prescott. Neither Lucas Ramsey nor Julian Prescott is the biological father. I sat frozen in my leather chair, the air completely rushing out of my lungs. My heart pounded violently against my ribs as the cold text stared back at me from the screen. Julian wasn't her father. For 4 years, Chloe had told me that Julian had abandoned them. For 4 years, she had cried about his cruelty, built an entire narrative of heartbreak, and used that story to gain my pity, my love, and my financial support. My hands trembled so violently that I nearly knocked my coffee cup over. I gripped the edge of the desk, staring at the screen in absolute horror as my entire reality fractured into a million sharp pieces. Chloe had lied about everything, and if Julian wasn't Maya's father, who was? The office walls felt like they were closing in on me. I stared at the laboratory report on my laptop screen until the black letters blurred into static. I picked up my phone with shaking fingers and dialed my older sister, Samantha Reed. "Lucas, is everything okay?" Samantha asked, her sharp legal mind picking up on my erratic breathing immediately. "You sound like you've seen a ghost." "Sam, I need you to come over right now." I choked out, gripping the phone tight. "Not to the house. Meet me at the coffee shop down the street. Please." 20 minutes later, Samantha slid into the leather booth across from me. She looked at the printed paper I shoved across the table, her eyes scanning the genetic markers with practiced precision. "Lucas, this says Julian Prescott isn't Maya's father," Samantha whispered, looking up with genuine shock. "Neither are you. Is this a lab error?" "No," I replied, my voice hollow. "I double-checked with the supervisor. It's definitive. Chloe lied to me for 4 years, Sam. She built our whole relationship on a story about how Julian abandoned them." "Listen to me very carefully, Lucas," Samantha said, leaning across the table and taking my hands in hers. "Do not confront Chloe emotionally. You cannot blow your cover until we have absolute facts. If she realizes you know, she will cover her tracks or disappear with Maya. I can't just act normal around her." I spat, my chest heaving with suppressed rage. "She asked me to sign adoption papers yesterday." "Use that," Samantha urged quietly. "Test her. Ask her about Julian again. See how far she takes the lie while I run a private asset search on her." When I returned home, Chloe was in the kitchen slicing apples for Maya. She turned to me with a brilliant, effortless smile that made my stomach churn. "Hey, honey," Chloe said lightly, walking over to kiss my cheek. "Did you bring the signed adoption papers back from the office?" I stepped back slightly, pretending to search my coat pocket. "Not yet. I was actually thinking about Julian today, Chloe. Are you completely sure he won't challenge this adoption later?" Chloe let out a bitter, dramatic laugh, shaking her head. "Julian? Lucas, that man hasn't asked about Maya once in 5 years. He's a selfish monster who paid me off to stay away because he didn't want a child ruining his reputation." Watching her lie without a single flicker of hesitation sent a chill straight down my spine. "Right," I said quietly, forcing a nod. "Just making sure." The next afternoon, Samantha called me with an address. Julian Prescott wasn't hiding. He was working out of his family's investment firm downtown. Samantha and I walked into his glass-walled office, demanding 10 minutes of his time. "Look, I don't know who you two are," Julian said, standing up from his desk with a frown. "If this is about Chloe Vance again, my legal team handles her monthly disbursements." "I'm Lucas Ramsey," I said, setting the Genesis Diagnostics report directly on his desk. "And you need to read this before you pay her another cent." Julian picked up the paper reluctantly, his annoyed expression slowly morphing into total bewilderment as he read the summary. "What is this?" Julian asked, looking up at me, his face pale. "Is this a joke?" "It's a verified DNA test," I said coldly. "Maya isn't your daughter, Julian. She never was." Julian sank back into his chair, rubbing his temples in utter disbelief. "That's impossible. Chloe showed me a positive pregnancy test 5 years ago. She swore up and down I was the father. She threatened to take the story to the press and ruin my family's firm unless I paid her $10,000 a month in private, off-the-books child support. $10,000 a month? Samantha interjected, her eyes narrowing sharply. Off the books? Julian, that isn't child support. That's criminal extortion under false pretenses. I've paid her over $600,000 over the last 5 years, Julian admitted, his hands trembling. I thought I was taking responsibility for a mistake. I had no idea. She was taking your money while letting me pay for the house, the clothes, and the food, I said, the bitter realization crashing over me like a wave. She was double-dipping on both of us. We need to know who the real biological father is, Samantha declared, tapping the document on the desk. If Chloe used a third party, there has to be a genetic record somewhere. Julian stood up, grabbing his coat. The chief geneticist at Genesis Diagnostics is Dr. Marcus Hayes. My family sits on the board of that hospital. Let's go see him right now. An hour later, we sat inside the private office of Dr. Marcus Hayes. The elderly geneticist reviewed the file on his computer terminal, cross-referencing the internal lab codes from Maya's blood draw. Dr. Hayes, we need complete transparency, Julian urged. Is there any possibility of a clerical mix-up in these results? None whatsoever, Mr. Prescott, Dr. Hayes replied firmly, adjusting his glasses. The comparative markers are absolute. Furthermore, when Mr. Ramsey requested the extended panel, our automated system flagged a secondary familial match in our broader regional registry. A match. I leaned forward, my heart hammering against my ribs. To who? The child shares 50% of her DNA with a prominent regional real estate developer named Richard Sterling, Dr. Hayes revealed quietly. He submitted a profile for a private screening 2 years ago. I closed my eyes as the final piece of the dark puzzle fell into place. Richard Sterling was Chloe's former boss, a married billionaire. She knew, I whispered, opening my eyes to look at Samantha and Julian. She knew Julian wasn't the father, and she knew Richard wouldn't leave his wife. She framed Julian for the money and used me for the domestic cover. She's done, Samantha said coldly, pulling out her legal notepad. It's time to trap her. The dining table was set with our finest china, candles casting a soft glow across the polished wood. To anyone looking through the window, it looked like a celebratory family gathering. Everything smells wonderful, Lucas, Chloe said cheerfully, walking into the dining room wearing a stunning red dress. She poured herself a glass of wine and smiled. Did the adoption lawyer confirm he's coming? He's on his way, I replied, keeping my voice perfectly calm as I placed 4 leather folders on the table. I invited a couple of extra guests to witness the final signing. Chloe paused, setting her glass down with a slight frown. Extra guests? Oh, your sister? Right on cue. The front doorbell rang. I walked over and opened the door. Samantha stepped inside, followed closely by Julian Prescott. Chloe turned around, and the moment her eyes landed on Julian, the color drained from her face. Her grip tightened around her napkin. What is he doing here? Chloe demanded, her voice instantly turning sharp and defensive. Lucas, why is Julian in our house? Sit down, Chloe, I said quietly, gesturing toward the dining chair. I am not sitting down with him, she snapped, pointing a trembling finger at Julian. He abandoned Maya. He has no right to be here while we sign the adoption papers. I didn't abandon anyone, Chloe, Julian said coldly, taking a seat at the far end of the table. Because Maya isn't my daughter. That is a lie, Chloe shouted, looking at me with wide, panicked eyes. Lucas, don't listen to him. He's just trying to cause trouble so he doesn't have to pay child support. Samantha stepped forward, unzipping her briefcase and laying a thick stack of documents directly in front of Chloe. These are the forensic DNA reports from Dr. Marcus Hayes at Genesis Diagnostics, Samantha stated with icy legal precision. The test panel covers Lucas, Julian, and Maya. Chloe stared at the papers, her mouth open, but no words came out. I discreetly added a full genetic comparison panel when we did Maya's medical screening. I said, stepping closer to the table. You told me Julian abandoned you. You told me he was a monster. But this test proves Julian shares 0 genetic markers with Maya. Lucas, please listen to me, Chloe stuttered, her confident demeanor shattering into tiny fragments. The lab made a mistake. You know how careless clinic staff can be. There is no mistake, Chloe, I interrupted, dropping a secondary folder onto her plate. We also pulled bank records detailing the offshore account in the Cayman Islands where you've been depositing $10,000 a month from Julian for the last 5 years. $600,000 in total. You were extortioning him while I paid for our rent, our food, and Maya's daycare. I added, my heart breaking all over again as I looked at her deceitful face. You used his money to build a secret fortune while using me as your domestic cover story. You spied on my bank accounts? Chloe gasped, her eyes darting frantically between the three of us. As Julian's legal counsel for fraud, I subpoenaed those records this morning, Samantha said smoothly. Extortion under false pretenses carries a heavy prison sentence, Chloe. Chloe sank heavily into her chair, burying her face in her hands. The tears began to flow, but there was no sadness in them, only the sheer terror of being caught. Who is Maya's real father, Chloe? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Tell me the truth. Right now. Chloe sobbed, wiping her mascara-stained cheeks with the back of her hand. It was Richard Sterling, she whispered, her voice cracking. My former boss. Julian let out a bitter laugh. The married real estate billionaire? You gotta be kidding me. He told me he would leave his wife. Chloe cried, looking at me desperately. When I got pregnant, Richard offered me $2 million to get an abortion and keep my mouth shut. I refused, but then he blocked my calls and threatened to ruin my career if I ever spoke his name publicly. So you pinned it on Julian because his family was wealthy and vulnerable to scandal, Samantha noted sharply. And then you met me, I said, shaking my head as the complete horror of her scheme hit me. You needed a reliable guy to play daddy, didn't you? Someone honest, hardworking, and stupid enough to believe your tragic story. No, Lucas. I loved you, Chloe sobbed, reaching across the table to grab my hand, but I pulled my arm away instantly. I really did. I wanted a normal life for Maya. I lied about Julian because I was terrified Richard's lawyers would take Maya away from me if they found out. You didn't lie to protect Maya, I said, taking off my engagement ring and sliding it across the table toward her. You lied because you are a selfish, manipulative fraud. Lucas, please don't do this, Chloe begged, throwing herself at my feet and crying hysterically. We can fix this. You love Maya. You're her father. I will always love Maya, I said, stepping back from her reach. But our engagement is over. You have 2 hours to pack your clothes and leave my house. You can't kick me out, she screamed, her weeping turning back in a frantic rage. Where am I supposed to go? You can discuss that with the district attorney, Julian said, standing up and buttoning his jacket. My legal team is filing formal extortion charges against you in the morning. I turned my back on her wailing cries, walking out of the dining room with Samantha as Chloe's entire world shattered around her. The morning sun barely cut through the heavy blinds of my living room as I sat staring at Maya's empty playroom. The front door slammed open, shattering the quiet stillness. Chloe stood in the entryway, looking disheveled and frantic, holding a small suitcase in one hand and clutching her phone in the other. You really think you can destroy my life and walk away unscathed, Lucas? She shouted, her voice echoing off the high ceilings. I stood up slowly from the couch, keeping my composure. You destroyed your own life the second you chose to build it on extortion and deceit, Chloe. If you don't call Julian right now and force him to withdraw those criminal charges, you will never see Maya again, she threatened, taking an aggressive step toward me, her eyes wild. Do you hear me? I will take her out of state today. I will change her name. You are nothing to her legally. My stomach plummeted, a cold flash of panic washing over me at the thought of losing the little girl I had raised for 4 years. Maya isn't a bargaining chip, Chloe, I said, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. You can't use her to escape accountability for your crimes. She is my daughter, Chloe screamed, stepping closer. Not yours. Not Julian's. You signed no legal papers. You have 0 rights. So drop the fraud investigation, or I wipe you from her life forever. She isn't going anywhere, Chloe. A sharp, steady voice interrupted from the doorway. Samantha stepped inside my apartment, wearing a dark navy business suit and carrying a leather litigation briefcase. She set the case on the dining table with a deliberate, echoing snap. "What are you doing here, Samantha?" Chloe sneered, turning her anger toward my sister. "This is a private family matter." "It ceased to be a private matter when you committed grand larceny and fraud," Samantha stated calmly, pulling a stack of stamped court documents from her folder. "I am acting as Lucas's legal representation, and this is an emergency motion filed with the family court 2 hours ago." Chloe scoffed, crossing her arms defensively. "You can't file anything. Lucas has no biological or legal relation to Maya. Under state law, Lucas qualifies as a de facto parent and psychological caretaker," Samantha explained, her tone ice-cold and precise. "He has provided her primary emotional, physical, and financial support for 4 years. The court just issued an emergency injunction granting Lucas temporary third-party visitation rights." Chloe's jaw dropped in absolute shock. "Visitation? That's ridiculous. I am her mother. And as her mother, you are currently under active investigation for wire fraud and extortion," Samantha continued, handing a second official paper directly to Chloe. "Furthermore, the state prosecutor just issued a temporary freeze order on all your domestic and offshore bank accounts." They froze my accounts?" Chloe stammered, her face turning chalk white as she stared at the court order. "Every single one," Samantha confirmed, "including the offshore account containing Julian's money. You cannot move a single dollar out of those funds, nor can you leave the jurisdiction with Maya without violating a federal court mandate." "You ruined me," Chloe shrieked, dropping her phone onto the carpet. "Lucas, please. You know I have no income without those accounts. How am I supposed to pay rent? How am I supposed to feed Maya? You should have thought about that before you stole $600,000. I said coldly, stepping beside Samantha. "You spent 5 years living off extortion. Now you have to face the consequences like an adult." Before Chloe could reply, her phone buzzed loudly on the floor. She scrambled down to grab it, answering on speakerphone in her panic. "Chloe Vance," a stern male voice barked through the speaker. "This is Marcus Vance from Prescott Financial's legal team. I am calling to inform you that Julian Prescott has officially filed a civil lawsuit against you in the County Superior Court." Chloe gasped, clutching the phone to her ear. "A lawsuit for what?" "For fraud, civil theft, and full restitution of the $600,000 paid under fraudulent pretenses over the past 5 years," the attorney stated ruthlessly. "We are seeking punitive damages along with full reimbursement of legal fees. You will be served with the formal summons within the hour." The call disconnected, leaving a heavy, suffocating silence in the room. Chloe dropped her hands to her sides, her knees trembling so violently that she had to grab the back of a chair to keep from collapsing onto the floor. The arrogant, untouchable facade she had maintained for years was completely gone, replaced by pure terror. "I have nothing left," she whispered, tears finally streaming down her cheeks without any dramatic flair. "I have no money, no home, no one." "You did this to yourself, Chloe," I said, looking at her with absolute emotional detachment. "You used everyone who ever cared about you. You used Julian. You used me. And worst of all, you used your own innocent daughter as a shield for your greed." "Lucas, please," she whimpered, looking up at me with pleading eyes. "Where am I supposed to go?" "You need to find a defense attorney," Samantha advised coldly, picking up her briefcase. "The police will be contacting you regarding the formal criminal indictment by tomorrow morning." Chloe stood frozen in the middle of the room, completely stripped of her financial safety net, her lies, and her control, realizing that the massive web of deceit she had built had finally collapsed right on top of her. The rain tapped steadily against my apartment window as I sat at the kitchen table, reviewing Maya's school schedule. A soft, hesitant knock echoed from the front door. I opened it to find Chloe standing in the hallway. The designer clothes, sleek hair, and polished arrogance were gone. She wore a faded coat, her eyes red-rimmed and hollow, carrying a damp canvas bag. "Lucas," she whispered, her voice cracking as she looked up at me. "Can I please come in for just 10 minutes?" I stepped aside, keeping my expression neutral. You can come in, Chloe, but if this is about the pending court trial, you need to speak to Samantha. Chloe stepped into the living room, wringing her hands nervously. She looked around the apartment, at the framed photos of Maya on the mantel, at the toys arranged neatly in the corner, and let out a shaky breath. I don't have anywhere else to turn, Lucas, she said, tears welling in her eyes immediately. The bank froze everything. My defense lawyer wants a $20,000 retainer that I don't have. I'm staying in a cheap motel outside the city, and my credit cards are all declined. Actions have consequences, Chloe, I said quietly, sitting down on the edge of the sofa while she remained standing. You stole $600,000 over 5 years. I did it for Maya, Chloe sobbed, taking a step toward me with her hands clasped together in desperate plea. You have to believe me, Lucas. When Richard abandoned me, I was terrified. I was young, broke, and pregnant. I fabricated the story about Julian because I wanted to ensure my daughter would never grow up in poverty. And what about lying to me? I asked, looking directly into her eyes. Why did you drag me into your web of deceit for 4 years? Because you were safe, she cried, wiping her wet cheeks with her sleeve. You were kind, honest, and loving. I knew you would be a wonderful father to Maya. I meant to tell you the truth eventually, I swear, but the longer we were together, the scarier it became. You didn't keep lying out of fear, Chloe, I stated calmly, my voice steady despite the old pain aching in my chest. You kept lying because it was comfortable. You let me pay for your life while you accumulated a secret fortune from Julian. You used my genuine love for a child as a weapon to keep me compliant. I am begging you, Lucas, she whimpered, sinking to her knees right on the hardwood floor, her shoulders shaking violently. Please, talk to Julian. Ask him to drop the civil lawsuit. Ask Samantha to stop pushing the state prosecutor for prison time. I can't go to jail, Lucas. Maya needs her mother. Looking down at her, a part of my heart remembered the woman I had loved and planned to marry. But the illusion was completely gone. I saw only the destruction her choices had wrought. I cannot change what Julian or the state prosecutor decides to do, I replied firmly. You committed fraud, Chloe. You chose to break the law every single month for 5 years. What about Maya? She pleaded, looking up at me with desperate, red eyes. Do you want her mother to be locked away in a prison cell? Don't you care about her anymore? I love Maya with everything in me, I said softly, standing up and looking down at her. I have cared for her every day of her life. But using her emotional well-being to shield yourself from your own crimes is the ultimate proof that you haven't changed at all. You are still using her as leverage. I have nothing left, Chloe shrieked, her voice echoing off the walls as she gripped her coat tightly. No money, no reputation, no home. My family won't even answer my phone calls after reading about the indictment in the news. Everything I built is ruined. You didn't build anything, Chloe, I said coldly. You built a house of cards out of stolen money and deliberate cruelty. It didn't ruin itself. It collapsed under the weight of your own greed. Are you really going to just throw me out into the rain? She asked, her tone shifting from desperate pleading to bitter resentment. After 4 years together, you won't give me a single dollar to help pay my legal fees? Not a single cent, I answered without a moment's hesitation. My financial support ended the moment you decided to treat my trust as a joke. Chloe slowly stood up from the floor, wiping her face with trembling hands. She stared at me, searching my eyes for any trace of the gullible man who used to cater to her every whim. She found only absolute firmness. You're cold, Lucas, she whispered bitterly. No, Chloe, I replied, walking over to open the front door for her. I'm just no longer your victim. Chloe stood at the doorway for a long, silent moment, the harsh reality finally setting in. There were no more lies left to tell, no more secondary backup plans, and no one left to exploit. She let out a final, broken sob, turned on her heel, and walked out into the cold rain, leaving behind the wreckage of the life she had destroyed. The sun beamed brightly across the green grass of my new backyard as 5-year-old Maya laughed, chasing a golden butterfly around the flower garden. Look, Daddy, it's flying higher than the trees, Maya shouted, pointing up at the clear sky before running toward the patio. I smiled, setting down my glass of lemonade on the outdoor table. I see it, sweetie. Don't run too fast, or you'll trip over your sneakers. I won't, she giggled, zooming around the big oak tree with endless energy. Samantha sat across from me on the sunlit porch, taking a slow sip of her iced tea. She set her glass down and pulled a thick blue folder out of her leather bag, placing it gently on the glass table between us. The judge signed the final decree this morning, Lucas, Samantha said, her face lighting up with a proud, warm smile. It's officially over. I picked up the court document, my thumb tracing the gold official seal stamped at the bottom. Formal co-guardianship? Full legal co-guardianship, Samantha confirmed, leaning back in her chair. Given Chloe's complete financial collapse and her probation terms, the family court ruled that remaining in your primary care is in Maya's absolute best interest. You have full legal custody rights over her schooling, medical care, and living arrangements. A massive wave of relief washed over my chest, clearing away the lingering shadow of stress that had hung over me for months. She gets to stay with me, I whispered, feeling a warm prickle of emotion in my eyes. She stays safe. She stays safe, Samantha agreed gently. And Chloe? She accepted the prosecutor's plea deal last week, I replied, looking down at the official papers. 30 months of probation, 300 hours of community service, and full court-ordered restitution to Julian's firm. Julian's team agreed not to pursue prison time as long as she surrenders her remaining offshore funds. Julian called me yesterday, by the way, Samantha noted, smiling slightly. He wanted to check on Maya. He said he's establishing a college trust fund for her under your control. He wants to make sure she's taken care of, even if he isn't her biological father. That's generous of him, I admitted, looking out at Maya, who was now carefully picking yellow flowers near the fence. Julian didn't know her anything after what Chloe put him through. Julian knows you saved him from 5 more years of extortion, Lucas, Samantha said quietly. He respects you for standing up for the truth. Daddy, Maya called out, running up the porch steps with a clumsy bouquet of yellow dandelions clutched in her small hand. Look what I picked for you. I leaned down and caught her in a warm hug, lifting her up onto my lap. These are beautiful, Maya. Thank you. Are we going to get ice cream later? She asked, looking up at me with bright, innocent eyes full of absolute trust. Aunt Sam said if I was good today, we could get chocolate. Aunt Sam is always making promises. I laughed, glancing over at my sister, who gave a playful shrug. But yes, we can definitely get chocolate ice cream after dinner. Yay! Maya cheered, sliding down off my lap and running back into the grass to collect more flowers. Samantha watched her go, turning back to me with a gentle gaze. How are you holding up, Lucas? Truly. I took a deep breath of the fresh afternoon air, feeling a profound sense of inner peace that I hadn't felt in 4 long years. I spent so much time worrying about the past, I said, leaning back against the patio chair. When I first read that DNA report, I felt like my whole life was a joke. I felt like I was just a fool being used by someone who never cared about me. You weren't a fool, Lucas, Samantha said firmly. You were a loving man who got deceived by an expert liar. I know that now, I said, looking out at Maya's joyful smile. And standing here today, I realized that blood doesn't make a father. Chloe thought she could trap me with adoption papers, but fatherhood isn't about legal traps, biological matches, or secret bank accounts. What is it about? Samantha asked softly. It's about being there every single day, I answered, my voice steady and resolute. It's about honesty, devotion, and protecting the people you love. Maya didn't care about the DNA results. She just needed a dad who would never lie to her or use her. And she got the best one, Samantha said, raising her glass toward me in a quiet toast. To new beginnings, little brother. To new beginnings, I repeated, clinking my glass against hers. The dark web of lies that Chloe had spun for years had finally vanished completely, leaving only clarity and truth behind. I had lost a fiancé, but I had gained my freedom, my dignity, and the pure, unconditional love of the daughter who truly made me a father. As the golden evening light bathed the backyard, I stood up from the porch table and walked down into the grass to join Maya, ready to build a bright, honest future together.